With football season upon us now, there's a lot happening in the news, so be sure to subscribe to my other channel, JG9 News, where I give you up-to-the-minute updates on everything happening in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, and I give my thoughts on everything taking place around the National Football League today. And now, on with our feature presentation. One of the things I always like to do before doing a video on a player is if I find something, I immediately check that player's Wikipedia page just to make sure that it's not there. I want my stories to be something obscure, something that you've never heard of before, something that's been largely lost throughout NFL history. I think it's what makes me unique. I love the research component of it. It's something that I love doing. So anytime I find a story on a player specifically, I just want to make sure that no one has touched on it before. So today's video is about Seattle Seahawks cornerback Cornell Webster. Let's check his Wikipedia page just to make sure that the story that I'm covering today is not on there. Cornell Webster was a professional American football player who played cornerback for 4 seasons for the Seattle Seahawks. That's it. Yeah, I think I'm okay on this one. Players in the NFL retire for a handful of reasons. You name it, it's probably happened at some point. You have players who retire because they get injured and they don't feel like they're healthy enough to play again. You have players who retire due to personal reasons, like something coming up in their family that they need to take care of, or for religious reasons. You have players who retire because they have other business ventures that seem more appealing and more prosperous. You have players who retire because they've accomplished everything they needed to, and they feel fulfilled. You have players who retire because they hate their current team and their current situation. You have players who retire because they're just not good enough anymore, and they've lost a step. You get the idea. There are so many reasons why a player would retire and walk away from the sport. And I've done many videos on players doing just that before. So if you want to learn more about one such instance, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Sometimes, players know when to walk away. However, I can promise you that I'm not retiring from making content anytime soon, as I love doing this and love learning more about the weird and wacky history of the NFL. So if you like that sort of stuff, and you want to learn more about the depths of NFL history, then this is the place for you, because we post a video every single day on this channel. So be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell, so you don't miss a single video that we post here. Thanks in advance for your support as we try and grow this community and try and get to 70,000 subscribers. However, of all the reasons to retire, the man that you've been watching this whole time had one of the craziest retirements that you've probably never heard of. This man right here is Cornell Webster, and in the middle of the 1980 season, while he was starting games for the Seahawks and while he was perfectly healthy, he just decided to walk away from the sport. And as for his post-retirement career, following the bizarre choice at hand, let's just say that this was a man who wasn't thinking all that clearly, and who had a mind of his own, I'll put it that way. Because this is the story behind Seattle Seahawks cornerback Cornell Webster, and one of the dumbest retirements in NFL history. Now, before I go any further regarding the video involving the man who played for this team behind me right here, you might be thinking to yourself during this vid, because it's absolutely crazy, that Cornell Webster was not in the right headspace. He was not in the right frame of mind. And it is true that in 2022, he died from symptoms of CTE at the age of 67 years old. However, from all eyewitness reports, from all doctors, from all autopsies, from everything I could find, it seemed as though the symptoms of CTE started occurring in 2015, so well after the incident in our story was taking place. So, just something to keep in mind. This was a man that seemed perfectly healthy throughout the late 70s and early 80s, as of this video getting released, and as of the topic of this video being in effect. So, just something to keep in mind. Yes, he did suffer from CTE at the end of his life, but it didn't seem to affect him around this time. With that being said, let's get on with it. Before I talk about the decision that Cornell Webster made and all of its craziness, we need some context to understand just who this man right here, Cornell Webster, was in the first place, and how good of a player he was for Seattle. And up until this point, Webster was a very solid corner with the Seahawks. One thing that really stuck out to anyone who watched him play was how surefire of a tackler he was. as while some cornerbacks shied away from making tackles or were just not very good at it, Webster was very solid in that department, as in a one-on-one situation, he was usually going to make the tackle. He also had very good ball coverage skills, and in 1978, he finished the year with 5 interceptions, which led the team, including one particular stretch where he recorded an interception in 3 straight games. Especially considering the fact that Webster was an undrafted free agent, the Seahawks seem to have found themselves a gem in this man right here. And by this point in 1980, Webster was still making an impact in Seattle's secondary, as he started the last 5 games for the team at cornerback, and was making tackles and was batting down passes every now and then. Heck, during Week 5, in Seattle's 26-7 win over the Houston Oilers, he had an interception, as he ended up picking off future Hall of Fame quarterback Ken Stabler, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So he was still playing at a pretty decent level. But just 8 days after making his 8th career interception, we would find out that this would be his last. Because in the middle of the season, Cornell Webster just decided to retire. In the middle of the year, he left the team. And the reason why? Turns out, he was just bored. Seriously, he was just bored of the game. He didn't have any more interest in football, and didn't want to continue on for another 2 months. So he just didn't. He quit. It should be noted that Webster was always a bit of a loose cannon. 1 year before, in 1979, he was so upset after getting criticized by a coach following a 37-21 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs that he left the team and didn't return for another 4 days. And to start off the 1980 season, he missed a part of training camp for personal reasons, which had nothing to do with wanting a new contract, since by all accounts, even according to Webster himself, the Seahawks were good to him. But something like this? Completely and utterly unexpected. The man was just bored and decided to retire. Said head coach Jack Patera, Cornell said he felt his interest in the game was lagging, and that in order to be fair to himself and the team, he felt it was best that he retire. Cornell came to me and told me that he appreciated what Seattle and the Seahawks had done for him, but that he wanted to retire. Just like that, Cornell Webster was done. He was just bored and wanted to move on to other things and other ventures of his life, which were never specified or made aware of. No real reason that anyone understood. Just, I'm not working here anymore because I don't want to. The Seahawks now needed to fill a hole in their secondary and a hole on their roster, because Cornell Webster had officially moved on to greener pastures. Cornell Webster's time in the NFL was done. He had closed the book on that chapter of his life. The Cornell Webster story, at least for the purposes of football, was over.
3 weeks later.
Yeah, Cornell Webster came back not even a month later. Because after missing 5 games and declaring that he was done with football and he was bored with the sport and had no interest in football, turns out that fire was back and he wanted to play again, so he came out of retirement. I can't say I've ever seen something like this before, where a player retires in the middle of the season, then comes back a month later in the same season. I've seen it used as a negotiation tactic. I've seen it where a player retired at the start of the offseason and then changed its mind. I've seen it where a player retired because he was upset, but then he cooled down and he unretired. I've seen a whole bunch of players retire and then unretire at another point in their life. But I can't say that I've ever seen this before, where a player quits the team in the middle of the year, then returns to the team in the middle of the same year, all because he was just bored and wasn't feeling like playing. No one knew what was going on here. Said head coach Jack Patera upon Webster's return, I didn't understand his retirement then, and I really don't know the reason now. That's always a good sign. That's always the sign of a well-thought-out plan from an individual. And everything that Webster said seemed to contradict his own actions. On one hand, he said that now, after that retirement, he was ready to play football again, and that he just needed some time to sort things out. But now, he was completely rejuvenated. As Webster said, right now, I want to play football. That's all I'll do until the end of the season. I'm not confused anymore. He even said that he had an obligation to finish this season with the Seahawks, and talked about how he would probably be back in 1981, which is bold to say and think about next year when we're not even done with this year and you walked away from it all. On the other hand, nothing he did indicated that he was rejuvenated. After traveling to Oklahoma and New York City during his month-long retirement, the man watched no football at all, watching only 1/4 of every Seahawks game, which seems like a great way to be a supportive teammate. He didn't even stay in game shape, as he gained 7 pounds over that month. But apparently, after sorting things out and figuring some things out, he was back and ready to play football, unretiring from the sport that he retired from just a month ago, even though he did nothing to prove that he was a new man. Because that makes sense, because any of this makes sense. You quit because you're bored, you come back a month later because you're no longer bored, but meanwhile, you watched none of the thing you were supposed to watch and you gained a ton of weight. I have a headache trying to follow all this, I really do. And it's going to come as no surprise to anyone when I say that Cornell Webster's retirement did not go according to plan whatsoever for him. Then again, I don't even know if he had a plan. Yes, the Seahawks let him back into the fold because they were paper thin at cornerback, and because the 1980 team was a highly dysfunctional mess, including an embarrassing loss on Thanksgiving against the Dallas Cowboys, where they looked like a high school football team, in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. They let him back out of desperation, even though they did not give him his starting spot back, but it did not last long. Webster got hurt shortly after coming back because, shocker, apparently when you're not in game shape, your body is at greater risk of getting injured. After getting hurt, Webster was asked to visit with the trainers and the doctors to fix his knee, to which Webster just simply didn't show up. Finally, after missing 4 meetings with trainers and 1 meeting with the team doctor, all in the span of 1 week, Webster was suspended by the Seahawks. Said Webster, "I will never play for the Seahawks again. I will never step on the field for them again. I want them to trade me." I mean, that's laughable, especially since they suspended you because you didn't show up. So you can't possibly make it seem like they're the bad guys here, especially since they were probably the only team desperate enough and stupid enough to let you pull off this stunt. But really? You want them to trade you? What possible trade value do you have? Seriously, Cornell Webster, what possible trade value do you have? You literally retired in the middle of the season because you were bored. You need to get knee surgery, so you're not healthy at all. You missed all of your meetings with the medical team. You cannot be trusted. You've walked out on the team before. You're a complete loose cannon who has publicly said that you sometimes don't feel as though your heart is in the game, and that you were debating walking away from the sport as early as 1979. What team in their right mind is going to trade for you? The Seahawks bent over backwards for you when they did not have to, and probably shouldn't have for a variety of reasons. This post-retirement sequel of yours was as bad of a sequel as Grease 2. Just an absolute mess in every sense of the word. And it's going to come as a surprise to absolutely no one when I say that the man who played for this team behind me right here never played another down in professional football again. I know, shocker. The Seahawks were unable to get any trade value for him whatsoever in 1981, although then again, Webster didn't help his cause because he went completely AWOL and refused to communicate with the team in their efforts to try and trade him, so good job there. That means that Webster's grand retirement as a new man, as a rejuvenated person, lasted a grand total of 2 games. That's it. 2 games. He was bored, so he retired. Then he unretired because he wasn't bored. And then he just got bored again. Good job, Cornell. Really good job. A Disney Channel cameo appearance from a celebrity has more substance than Cornell Webster's unretirement. In some ways, it felt as though Cornell Webster was Antonio Brown before Antonio Brown, minus, the talent of Antonio Brown. There's a ton of blame to go around here, from Webster himself for his actions, to the Seahawks being desperate and foolish enough to take him back, even though something like this seemed entirely foreseeable based on his past. But one thing is for certain. Of all the unretirements in NFL history, this one has to be up there with one of the dumbest and the worst of them all. Especially considering the fact that you had probably never heard of this one before today. There really was no point to this one, there wasn't. If a player retires because they're bored and they come back 1 month later out of shape and still not really having any interest in the game, odds are it's not going to work out. Just a hunch. Just a gut feeling on that one. Because the incident involving the man you've been watching this whole time in Cornell Webster, he and the entire situation could be summed up by the classic movie, Stupid in Seattle. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.